On January the 15th, last week, David Lynch passed away. And we thought that it would just be appropriate as filmmakers ourselves, as film lovers, to take a moment to sit down and talk about him and talk about his work and specific things that affected us as creatives and just the overall legacy of a really great artistic mind, a really powerful presence in just a sort of inner but outer Hollywood, sort of living between moments and between worlds. I think David Lynch was a visionary, an artist, a filmmaker, a poet, and a crazy guy, but in all the best ways, I think. So, Reuben, please start us off.
So it's interesting because I think the first time I sort of knew who David Lynch was, I think I was probably about 14 and I was watching television late at night. I was just sort of awake at 1 in the morning and like I think my brother was asleep on the sofa. And the Elephant Man came on. And I just remember immediately being so enraptured by it and so intrigued by it. And by the end of the film, he'd woken up. We were both watching it, and it was just brilliant. And it was such phenomenally kind of moving and exciting filmmaking at the same time. The genius of David Lynch shone through. And I've just loved him ever since, and and seen more of his films and learned more about his character. And it feels like such a tremendous loss for for art, honestly, because as you say, he was a painter, he was a musician. Sometimes he made strange videos on YouTube. I don't know if you followed him on YouTube, but every single day during the pandemic he would get a collection of ping pong balls with numbers written on them, put them in a glass jar, fumble around in the jar without looking at them, and then show the camera a ball and say, the number is 5. And then the video would end. And he did that every single day, and it was completely surreal. It was so Lynch. It was completely surreal, but it was also kind of fascinating and weirdly gripping, and the internet sort of became really like, what's going to happen, really gripped by it, because he never picked out the number 7. And I think the fact that David Lynch managed to make picking a ball out of a jar every single day during a pandemic interesting and like genuinely like performance art just says everything about him as a character. And I loved his hair, and I loved his coffee drinking, and I loved his weather forecasts. He was just brilliant and fascinating and a true artist, and by all accounts, a really good, kind person who had no time for the nonsense that often happens on Hollywood sets. So I think that it's a loss for cinema. It's a loss, for humanity. And it's a loss for me. So I'm very sad. I haven't been able to go and watch one of his films because I don't know which one it should be. I don't know what would be the right one to kind of honour his death. But tell me about your feelings and your relationship with David Lynch films. Did you watch a film when you heard that he had died?
No, similarly to you, Reuben, I haven't found the right one to sit down and watch. Perhaps Eraserhead, but also perhaps maybe one of his later works. I know that his work connected me and my dad quite a lot, in the sense that we sat down and watched the 80s Dune, which my dad, I know David Lynch famously hates it, but my dad adored and still adores the film. He loves the Villeneuve ones, but he really did grow up loving the film. And it was great to see, because I think that film is not as flawed as people think. I think it is an 80s oddity. And I love those really crazy. I would have loved to see what the version would have been if David Lynch had complete control over that film. Me and my dad also sat down and watched Twin Peaks together the first time I watched it. And I remember we watched the pilot twice. We sort of started at one point years before we actually continued to watch the whole series. But just seeing it twice with him and just being engaging with such masterwork. I think the Twin Peaks pilot is one of the greatest pieces of television ever put to celluloid. Um, I think that he is just such a sincere artist, and I think that's what people sometimes forget is they love the aesthetic, they love Lynchian aesthetic, but they don't understand why it works. Is that to David Lynch, it's just I heard someone make a comment when I was looking through, because I've been watching a lot of videos. I was watching interviews the day before he died as well. It was kind of sadly prophetic. And interviews about his works, because I find him most inspiring. But it's because he finds the beauty of great pie and great coffee and kind characters like Dale Cooper, or madly in love characters like Nick Cage and Laura Dern in Wild at Heart. That it's as sincere as he approaches the surrealist angles. They're all on the same level of reality as a filmmaker. It's not treated as trying to be bizarre. It's not treated as trying to be saccharine. It's treated as just plain and simple. And I think what I wanted to talk about was my sort of favorite bit of David Lynch
Yeah.
filmmaking. And it's very simple. It's from episode 1 of series 2 of Twin Peaks. It's a great moment in the famous diner that the character of Bobby Briggs and his father are sat down at a table. And it's not very cinematically, it's just shot, reverse shot, and then a 2-shot later in the scene. It doesn't explore any wild lighting, it doesn't explore any wild set design, but what it does do is it captures character brilliantly. And that's what people sometimes avoid when they're trying to create this Lynchian aesthetic for themselves, is that actually it's all about the character and how human they really are. It's a really beautiful scene. It starts with the father telling his son, and they do not have a good relationship. They are very separate from one another. But the father starts telling his son about a dream. And it's very, and David Lynch, you could say all his films are dreamlike, but the sort of description, the descriptors of this dream are so beautiful and so intricate, very, very well thought out. But you just see that the actual reason of all this dialogue is that the father is confessing to his son his true emotions to him. And you see on the character of Bobby's face of just the realization of that. And that's such mature directing, because it is a roundabout way to say, oh, I'm proud of you, son, and I love you. But it is so delicate. It's built up, it's earned, it's deserved. And when the general shakes the hands with his son and says, I'm proud of you, and I'm so happy to see that you have become this man. It shatters you. It shatters you. And it's such a random scene. It just shows up in the episode. It doesn't add to the plot. It doesn't change anything. It is just, but it affects the whole series from then on. The idea of filmmaking is that actually it's all about an emotional arc, or an understanding, a very acute understanding of humanity in general. And I think that's what, and it's what I harp on about in Cinema Spotlight all the time, is the character and the actual understanding of human beings, which is so often overlooked to create a good film. And it's such an integral part. And I think you're going to miss that, because no one can capture it quite the same, because these characters can do the most bizarre thing in the world, and yet it's right for them. It makes sense for them completely and wholly. I don't think there's a single David Lynch character in any of his works that isn't fully realized in David Lynch's head and in the performer's head. He had such a tightly knit group of people who loved working for him, and who were often repeated, and so perfectly, because they understood it. Harry Dean Stanton, for example, is a great example. Great friends with him, a brilliant actor. Or Emmerich McGill, who is in both Dune and Twin Peaks, and of course the amazing Kyle MacLachlan, who I read his tribute to David Lynch, absolutely beautiful, about how they sort of crafted one another. It was incredible. So I know I've been harping on a lot, but a director, my absolute favorite, and will be sincerely missed. And we have been robbed of any future greatness, but we have a lot of greatness to look back on.
It's true, and I would like to leave you, Jake, with a fact that you might know, but you might not, and I know that you'll appreciate it, which is, of course, that he was the inspiration for Peter Capaldi's costume as the 12th Doctor. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. That's amazing. But now it makes perfect sense, especially Series 9 hair, and you've got it.
So,
Amazing.
I mean, yeah, as you say, he was a true titan, one of the greatest, filmmakers I think I've ever seen working. So I feel very lucky, in many ways to have watched his films and to have been around at the same time as him. And yeah, it's a real sad day for cinema lovers. But exactly as you say, so much great stuff that we already have. So yes, rest in peace, David Lynch.